I knew my time at Alaric Systems was coming to an end the very moment. Lana Reiser called my entire development team a luxury we could no longer afford during a transition phase. We were only 10 minutes into the Monday morning all-hands meeting, and I already felt like I was watching the corporate obituary of my life. Work being drafted in real time. She was presenting on screen from the San Mateo Regional Headquarters, sitting in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the California sun. A permanent, practiced smirk was plastered across her face, the kind of expression worn by someone who believed that corporate smugness was a valid substitute for strategic technical leadership. Her hair was styled too perfectly for someone in charge of innovation, and her voice carried that slick, HR-approved syrup tone that executives learn in expensive management boot camps. It was a combination of fake empathy and subtle corporate threat. She clicked her slide clicker to reveal a new deck titled Alignment Directives for Future-Facing Teams, and announced that we would be moving to a mandatory, full-time on-site collaboration schedule starting the following week. There was no prior warning and absolutely no room for discussion. She simply declared that this was the new culture of Alaric Systems, and we were expected to comply. I sat in my basement office in Portland and stared at the screen, listening to the hum of the cooling fans on my server racks. The air down here was cool and carried the faint scent of old paper, vanilla coffee creamer, and static electricity. For 3 consecutive quarters, my logistics AI routing pilot had outperformed even the most optimistic sales projections in the company history. I had built, refined, and deployed that entire system from my home office, sitting in a comfortable chair and wearing cat-themed slippers, away from the constant noise, the fluorescent lights, and the distractions of the corporate tower. Under my guidance, our regional fleet operations had achieved a 94% efficiency rating, drastically reducing fuel costs, optimizing delivery times, and eliminating delivery delays across 12 states. I had worked late nights, spent weekends resolving routing errors, and sacrificed my own personal time to make this platform a success. But under Lana's new regime, actual performance and measurable results mattered far less than visible presence in a cubicle. She was a VP who believed that leadership was measured by the number of heads she could see from her desk. She was determined to make her mark on the company by cutting costs and forcing employees back into rigid schedules, regardless of how it impacted our actual work output. She had no understanding of how creative engineering actually worked. Then she delivered the real kicker of the morning. She announced that all research and development prototypes, early-stage code-based concepts, and proprietary technical notebooks had to be logged immediately into the shared internal repository. She said her office would be reviewing all origin points for patent consolidation effective immediately. I leaned back in my chair and felt my jaw clench. That policy was not about collaboration. It was about legal theft, a quiet, paper trail cleans corporate seizure of intellectual property. If you think that sounds paranoid, you have never seen a venture-backed vice president slide into an organization from a rival company with a memory stick, full of ambition and a loophole in her non-disclosure agreement. I had seen this play before at other tech firms, where quiet developers were stripped of their life work by ambitious managers who wanted to present the innovations to the board as their own achievements. Lana was aiming for a promotion, and she wanted to use our team designs as her ladder. She wanted to present a complete patent portfolio to the board before the end of the fiscal year to secure her stock options. I unmuted my microphone calmly, my voice cutting through the chatter of the other participants on the call. Can I get clarification on whether this database logging directive applies to software modules and logistics systems developed entirely outside of active work hours? Lana smiled that sharp, predatory smile, her eyes narrowing as she looked at her camera. Howard, if you are developing solutions that are relevant to the roadmap of Alaric Systems, we legally assume it falls within our corporate scope. I pressed the issue, keeping my voice steady, refusing to let her intimidate me in front of the team, even if no company equipment, company hours, or company team members were involved in the development process. She laughed, a short, dismissive sound that made the conference line go completely silent. Honestly, Howard, if you do not like the new policies, you can just resign and go. The call went dead silent. Even my junior developer, Byron, who usually typed with frantic energy, stopped mid-keystroke. I looked at the screen, smiled, and said, "Thank you for the exit strategy." I closed my laptop, unplugged my second monitor, and took a long, slow breath. I did not make a scene. There was no slamming of doors, no shouting at supervisors, no dramatic confrontational speeches. I simply grabbed a small cardboard box and packed the few items that were actually mine. I took my favorite ceramic mug shaped like a penguin, two personal notebooks filled with handwritten algorithms, and the small wooden plaque my mentee Darla had made for me last year that said "Workaround Wizard." I left the company-issued monitor, the standard mouse, and even the mechanical keyboard I had bought with my own money because the company keyboard clicked like a tap-dancing insect. I wanted Lana to keep all of it. She was going to need every resource she could find for the fire she was about to walk into. I walked out of the building carrying my box like I was heading out for a normal lunch. Darla caught up with me at the elevator bank, her face pale and her eyes wide with confusion. "Howard, what is happening? Where are you going?" I looked at her, steady as concrete, and told her, "Stay, observe." The elevator doors slid shut, and I descended to the parking garage. I popped the trunk of my car and placed my cardboard box next to a large white envelope. The envelope was addressed to the General Counsel of Alaric Systems, stamped, sealed, and ready for the mail. Inside was not a resignation letter, but a formal declaration of my independent inventions. It was a digital and legal paper trail showing that the AI-driven logistics engine they were preparing for their next product launch was my private property. I had spent years building it outside the scope of my employment contract, using my own hardware, my own network, and my own funds. They thought I would cave and slink away like a defeated employee with a bruised ego. But I do not bruise easily. I build quietly, and when someone tries to steal what I have built, I do not fight. I file. I drove straight from the office to Oakway Commons, a quiet co-working space situated between a local dentist and a vape shop. It was not a glamorous location, but it had the two things I required: complete anonymity and a notary named Phil, who did not ask unnecessary questions as long as the documents were neat and the coffee was hot. Phil greeted me with a nod, slid the verification forms across the counter, and watched as I signed my name. With 3 signature confirmations and 2 timestamp verifications, we made it official. I uploaded the final compiled codebase into an encrypted independent archive that we had pre-arranged the previous month. What I had filed were 3 separate provisional patent declarations under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 111BB. The filings covered my real-time AI-based predictive routing engine, my load-balancing matrix refinements, and the dynamic resource balancing logic I called the Ghost Protocol. The Ghost Protocol was the core of my system. It was an invisible back-end logic engine that adjusted logistics routes in real time based on environmental disruptions, vehicle wear, and unexpected delivery delays. It was designed to move data so silently that even system administrators would miss the activity, and it was the very technology that Alaric Systems needed to make their upcoming product suite a market leader. I had developed this software using complex mathematical models that optimized pathfinding algorithms, reducing computational latency by over 40% compared to standard solutions. Legally, that technology belonged to me. I had built the first version of the algorithm 11 months before Lana Reiser ever joined Alaric. The original logic had been sketched on a napkin at a diner in Kent, right next to a half-eaten stack of pancakes, long before any corporate integration policy was even drafted. I had not built it out of spite. I built it because I saw the corporate writing on the wall. I knew the company valued speed over precision and was prone to claiming ownership of everything their employees created. I wanted to build something that would protect my future, independent of the corporate hierarchy that treated veteran engineers as replaceable assets. I wanted to make sure that my hard-earned knowledge remained mine. To ensure my legal protection was absolute, I had taken meticulous precautions over the past year. I never wrote a single line of code on my company-issued laptop. I did not use the company network, and I never logged into the Alaric servers from my home development environment. Every Git commit had a cryptographic timestamp showing it was created late at night or during the weekends. Every database backup was synced to a personal, encrypted cloud storage account. Furthermore, I had established a solid third-party witness system. Once a month, I met with my old college friend Ravi, who was now an adjunct computer science professor at the local community college. We would meet at a quiet coffee house, review my code progress, discuss the mathematics behind the routing engine, and Ravi would sign off on my progress logs, confirming that no Alaric resources were used in the creation of the system. I then had Phil notarize those signed logs at Oakway Commons. It was a rigorous, paranoid routine, but in the corporate world, paranoia is simply foresight wearing work boots. I spent hours double-checking the files, verifying that the cryptographic hashes matched perfectly, and making sure that the paper trail was completely unbroken. I had also hired Eliza Trent, a non-nonsense intellectual property attorney in downtown Portland, who looked like she had gone 10 rounds with patent trolls before breakfast. Eliza reviewed my logs, my notarized progress reports, and my off-site development proof. She even reviewed watermarked video recordings of my coding sessions that featured a local radio station playing in the background to establish the date and time. Eliza confirmed that under the terms of my 2012 contract renewal, the company had no claim to software developed entirely outside of work hours without company resources. Ironically, during her first week as VP, Lana had modified the standard employee agreements to consolidate her power over new hires. In her rush to streamline the onboarding process, she had introduced a loophole that explicitly exempted pre-existing, independently registered intellectual property from corporate ownership claims. Eliza had identified this loophole immediately and used it to secure my provisional filings, turning Lana's own weapon against her. After leaving the co-working space, I drove to the lake and parked under a large pine tree. My phone buzzed with a message from Darla. Lana just asked if you left for lunch. Have you seen the spreadsheets she is looking for? I did not reply. I watched a group of ducks fight over a piece of bread and finished my coffee. For 10 years, I had made quiet contributions to Alaric systems, fixing other people's code, turning bad ideas into marketable products, and saving executives from their own technical incompetence. I had been invisible to them, a quiet resource they took for granted. Now I was the ghost in their machine. They were preparing to launch a product suite built on my foundation, unaware that they had just walked onto a legal minefield. I had spent my life learning that silence only protects the thief, so I had stopped being silent. I had become precise, and in corporate disputes, precision cuts far deeper than anger ever could. I knew the legal gears were already turning, and Alaric Systems was running out of time. I put my phone in the glove box, started the engine, and drove home to my quiet house in Portland, ready to wait for the storm to hit. Within Alaric Systems, the preparation for the launch of Project Apex reached a frantic pace. Lana stood before the board of directors and declared that Apex would be unveiled at the Midwestern Tech Frontier Summit in 3 weeks. She called it the company Moonshot, a next-generation logistics intelligence suite that would revolutionize fleet management and secure millions in venture capital. But behind the scenes, the engineering team was running into major technical barriers. Lana had demanded that the entire codebase be logged in the repository. But when the developers tried to compile the demo, they found that the routing modules were completely broken. What they did not know was that before I left, I had removed the core optimization logic and replaced it with empty shell functions. I did not do this maliciously. It was a standard safeguard to protect my proprietary algorithms. I left the interface structures intact, but the actual mathematical models and real-time balancing triggers were gone. The junior developers scrambled to patch the holes, but they did not have the original documentation or the mathematical models required to make the system function. They spent long nights in the office, fueled by cold pizza and energy drinks, trying to reverse engineer the logic I had spent years perfecting. They tried to trace the calculations, but my code was designed with complex feedback loops and dynamic memory management that resisted simple reverse engineering. The compiler kept throwing errors, and the system would freeze whenever they tried to run the route optimization scripts. Byron, a bright young engineer who often asked me for guidance, noticed something strange in the repository history. He flagged a message in the team's Slack channel. This routing module has a Git origin that predates the Apex repository by 4 months. It looks like it was developed independently before the integration policy was even drafted. Should we reread this from scratch to be safe? Lana's reply was swift and dismissive. We are under a tight deadline. Keep moving and integrate what we have. She believed that any code residing on the company servers was corporate property, regardless of its origin, and she was unwilling to delay the launch for what she considered a minor technicality. She was focused entirely on the public presentation, ignoring the engineering reality of the software they were building. She wanted to show the board that she could deliver results quickly, and she was willing to take shortcuts to get there. As the summit drew closer, the codebase began to fail under synthetic load testing. The routing simulations buckled, and the load balancers threw constant errors. The internal engineering team tried to bring in external contractors to reverse engineer the logic, but the contractors ran into immediate conflicts. When they looked at the code headers, they found my personal copyright notice and my trademark namespace, Harlow Routing V1. One of the contractors, an experienced systems architect, warned the team that modifying patented safety software without written authorization was a violation of federal copyright law under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, and could expose the company and the individual developers to severe legal liability. He told Byron that he would not touch the code until they had a signed release from the patent holder. He explained that if they continued to modify the software, they could face personal litigation from the actual owner. He packed his things and walked out, refusing to get involved in what he called an obvious intellectual property dispute. Despite these warnings, Lana pushed forward. She ordered the PR department to release teaser videos and draft marketing materials about next-level industry disruption. She even ordered custom lanyards featuring a QR code that was supposed to link to the live demo. In meetings, she brushed off the engineering team concerns, claiming that innovation was always messy but magical. She stood before the staff, talking about phase convergence and AI-native synergies, using a vocabulary of buzzwords she had memorized but did not understand. She was convinced that the summit presentation would make her untouchable, and she was willing to ignore every warning sign to achieve her goals. She believed that a slick presentation could mask a broken product, and that the legal consequences could be managed later. She was determined to have her moment on stage, no matter what. Meanwhile, the doubt began to spread within the office. A message was forwarded to me anonymously from one of the senior analysts. "Isn't this module part of Howard Old's sandbox project? I thought he owned the rights to that system." Nobody dared to raise the issue publicly, but the engineers knew the code was unstable. They were working 80-hour weeks, trying to patch a system that was built on stolen, incomplete foundations. They were duct taping a dam with paper receipts, hoping it would hold until the live presentation was over. And all the while, I sat at home, working in my garden and watching the autumn leaves fall, knowing that the clock was ticking down for Alaric Systems. I knew that the summit would be the perfect stage for their ambition to crumble under the weight of their own negligence. I had done my job, and now the system itself would deliver the final verdict. The confrontation began on a rainy Monday morning, exactly 10 days before the Tech Frontier Summit. Karen, the general counsel of Alaric Systems, received a formal cease and desist letter at her desk. The letter, drafted by Eliza Trent, was a detailed legal document citing our provisional patent filings under 35 U.S.C. Section 111(b). It stated that Alaric Systems was preparing to demonstrate and market a product that infringed upon 3 active patents held by Howard Harlow. The letter did not contain vague threats. It included annotated screenshots of the Alaric repository, comparisons of the Git commit timestamps, and copies of my notarized progress reports. Eliza made it clear that any continued use, demonstration, or marketing of the routing engine would constitute willful patent infringement under Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271, exposing Alaric Systems to treble damages and injunctive relief under Section 284. Karen immediately called Lana and the CTO into a closed-door meeting. I was told by an internal contact that Lana laughed and dismissed the letter. She claimed that provisional patents were meaningless placeholders and that I was simply a disgruntled former employee attempting to shake down the company. She argued that they had already spent $50,000 on the summit booth, that the media had been briefed, and that pulling the demo now would destroy their market credibility. She insisted that they proceed with the launch as scheduled, believing that my legal counsel was bluffing. The CTO remained silent, knowing that the codebase was entirely dependent on my logic and that they had no in-house alternative. Karen warned Lana that if they proceeded with the demo after receiving formal notice, it would establish willful intent, which would automatically trigger the treble damages clause under Section 284 if the case went to court. But Lana refused to back down, her ego blinding her to the legal danger. She was convinced that the company's size and resources would protect them from any legal challenge. She believed that a large corporation could easily crush a lone ex-employee in court. Regardless of the merits of the case, the day of the Tech Frontier Summit arrived, and the convention center in Chicago was filled with the smell of stale coffee and corporate ambition. Lana arrived at booth number 207, wearing a tailored blazer, surrounded by her marketing team and a preloaded demo rig. They had set up large banners displaying the Project Apex logo, and the promotional materials were stacked neatly on the table. But the atmosphere inside the booth was tense. Byron and the other engineers hovered near the laptop, doing last-minute checks and trying to keep the system stable. The code had been scrambled in a desperate attempt to bypass the patented safety modules, but the changes had only made the architecture more fragile. The competitors across the aisle watched them with interest, noting the frantic activity. Several investors had already gathered around, waiting for the demonstration. The CTO stood at the back of the booth, checking his watch every few seconds, his face pale with anxiety. Lana walked up to the main stage for the live product showcase. She was introduced as a leading voice in logistics innovation, and she delivered her pitch with practiced confidence. She spoke of revolutionizing fleet operations and reducing costs, her voice projecting throughout the hall. She then turned to the large screen behind her and announced a live, real-time demonstration of Project Apex. The audience clapped and the simulation started. For the first 20 seconds, the map loaded and the virtual trucks began to route across the screen. The graphics were clean, and the presentation seemed to be going perfectly. Then, the system hit one of the empty shell functions I had left in the code. The screen froze. A bright red error message flashed across the monitor. Unhandled exception, null logic route reference. Byron frantically typed at the laptop, his fingers flying across the keys in a desperate attempt to reset the server, but the routing engine had collapsed. The fallback logic failed because it had never been written. A contractor standing near the stage asked loudly, "Is this crash related to the patent infringement notice?" The question echoed in the sudden silence of the room, and several audience members whispered. Lana stood frozen at the podium, her smile cracking as she gestured weakly toward the screen. The live stream was abruptly cut, and the Alaric team was left on stage in front of investors, competitors, and tech journalists, staring at a crashed system and a ruined launch. The humiliation was absolute, and the news of the failure began to spread across social media within minutes. The flagship product was dead, and everyone knew it. The CTO turned and walked out of the hall without saying a word to Lana. The debriefing meeting the next morning was held in the main conference room of Alaric Systems. The room was sterile, windowless, and silent, filled with the cold light of the morning. Lana sat at the center of the table, flanked by the chief operating officer and two board members who had flown in after the summit disaster. Her phone was face down, and her corporate confidence had completely vanished. 5 minutes into the meeting, the door opened, and Eliza Trent walked in. She did not ask for permission. She simply walked to the head of the table and placed a thick manila envelope in front of the general counsel. "Howard Harlow sends his regards," she said, her voice calm, clear, and firm. Karen opened the envelope and began to review the documents. Inside was a compilation of my Git commit logs, the notary stamps from Oakway Commons, and a signed affidavit from Ravi confirming the independent development of the routing engine. But the final piece of evidence was a USB drive containing an audio recording of the Monday morning meeting when Lana had fired me. The recording captured her voice clearly. "If you don't like the new policies, Howard, you can just resign and go. Once it's in the system, it's ours. That's how it works." Eliza explained that, because I had left the company before submitting the code, and because the development had occurred entirely outside of work hours without company resources, Alaric Systems had no legal claim to the technology. Under 35 U.S.C. Section 271, their attempt to demo the system was a clear case of willful infringement, and we were prepared to seek treble damages under Section 284. The board members looked at the documents and listened to the recording in grim silence. The CEO, Gerald Thorne, turned to Lana and asked if she had verified the contract terms before claiming ownership of the software. Lana could not answer. She sat there, looking pale and small, as the reality of her career-ending mistake set in. The general counsel advised the board that they had no legal defense. If they went to court, they would lose, and the company would be financially ruined by the treble damages and the public disclosure of the theft. The board voted unanimously to cancel Project Apex immediately and terminate Lana Reiser employment for cause. Within seconds, the CTO revoked her administrative access, and her security badge was deactivated. She was escorted from the building by security, leaving behind a ruined career and a lesson in intellectual property law. The board wanted to minimize the damage, and they knew that keeping Lana would only invite further legal action. The company signed a settlement agreement with me the following week. They agreed to cease all use of my patented technology, issue a public statement of retraction, and pay my legal fees. My name was restored in the internal documentation as the sole author of the routing algorithms. The tech journalist I had spoken with published a detailed article titled "How a Veteran Architect Outsmarted His Employer with Patents." My LinkedIn account exploded with messages from recruiters, founders, and industry colleagues. Even Darla messaged me, "You actually did it." I did not reply. There was nothing left to say. The vindication was quiet, reflected in the updated documentation and the empty office across town. I had protected my work, and I had done it completely within the bounds of the law. I was hired shortly after by Viron Labs as their chief patent officer, with a competitive salary of $200,000 per year and full executive benefits. That provided me with a glass-walled office, a view of the city skyline, and a mandate to design security protocols to protect their research. I spent my days working with brilliant developers who respected my experience, and I knew my future was secure. Meanwhile, Alaric Systems tried to launch a simplified version of their software called Root IQ. But as they ran the code, the load balancers failed and the system refused to initialize. The dependencies were deeply embedded in the firmware, protected by my patents, and tagged with my personal namespace. They realized too late that they could not run the system without me. I sat in my new office, took a sip of my coffee, and smiled. I had taken my chair back, and this time they would have to pay to keep it running. I was no longer a resource to be managed. I was the architect of my own destiny, and I had built a foundation that no one could steal. I was finally back where I belonged, in control of my own life.